For some people, it's not surprising to hear that the latest COVID vaccine booster study has been halted. So you can see here, this is a Reuters article. Pfizer BioNTech halt US COVID vaccine study after recruitment struggles. The story is not really exactly as you would think. It's a little bit more nuanced and complex, but it highlights a very important point that there are going to be a lot more sick people around than we could have ever anticipated. And one of the things I'm going to encourage you to do is that you need to be aware of this because nobody is telling you. They're telling you that it's all in your head that people are sicker. Well, I have done the research, and guess what? You can get a preemptive snapshot view of what changed after the pandemic. And specifically in the cohort that they were interested in, up to about 64, this is about 59, you can see here hypertensive heart and renal disease was the significant riser after 2020. Now, it's 182%. This is relevant in terms of what we're talking about. And as I said, if you want to know more, make sure you look at the description and the link below. But here is the reality. They hit some problems with regards to this study. And it was because of some rules being changed, which I'm going to come back to in a second. But let's look at exactly what Reuters said. So the summary is that FDA's stricter trial requirements and the low US vaccine uptake hinders study approval. And so because there was slow enrollment, they said not safety concerns, they were stopping the trial. And guess what? Moderna is facing a similar issue. And this has all stemmed from the fact that when Dr. McCarthy and you had as well the changes at the top of the FDA, and this is Vinay Prasad, when they were brought in, they made some changes with regards to the way how the FDA and the CDC were operating. And so both of these guys were brought in by RFK. And it was highlighted, and this was from May of 2025. What does the new FDA framework mean for the future of COVID vaccines in the USA? Under proposed policy, updated shots would be limited to at-risk populations. So what exactly happened was that they just asked a simple question, really about the way that it was being approached with the pandemic. They asked the question as to whether or not enough evidence was being used with regards to vaccination. I completely agree with the question because I was asking the question when they were rolling out vaccines to the whole population. I was saying, hold on. We know who is high risk. Why are you giving it to everybody and giving the impression that the risk is the same across all cohorts? That's misinformation. In fact, for me saying that, I was highlighted as making in misinformation. However, this is what they said in the New England Journal of Medicine. And this was again in 2025. This was done by Vinay Prasad and Martin McCary, two gentlemen we just showed, an evidence-based approach to COVID-19 vaccination. And they were highlighting that over the past 5 years, the United States had moved towards an annual COVID booster. Actually, it's now like try 3 times a year, not just annual. But anyway, each fall, these COVID boosters were developed alongside the seasonal influenza vaccines and recommended for every American. So you can see what the strategy there was, is that align it with influenza and just say, well, this is just like another flu shot. Just go along with that. It's a good money maker, and I can understand why they were doing that. However, what they realized is that this was not necessarily based on science. And unlike the influenza vaccine that had decades of research behind it and observational studies, the COVID vaccine was pretty new. Why would you treat it with the same degree? That's a good question. And this is exactly what they said. They highlighted that the vaccine recommendations were primarily to older adults over 65 years of their age or those at high risk for severe COVID-19. But the United States had adopted a one-size-fits-all regulatory framework and granted broad marketing authorization to all Americans over the age of 6 months. So this is clearly not about science. It's, however, a very good business model, if you can understand what I mean. The more people you give it to, whether or not they need it is irrelevant. It's just if you can get some more shots in the arm. Well, that was being questioned. And so what they did is they put in higher standards for people who were younger. So if you come back to the Reuters article, you then see what it was that they struggled with, because they had to now demonstrate this study is not ending as a result of any safety or risk-benefit concerns. This is now the pharma talking. We intend to stop the study due to slow enrollment and an inability to generate relevant post-marketing data. And what was happening here is that not enough people, one, were taking the booster. I can't remember. Are we up to 10, 11, 12? I don't know. But anyway, not enough people were taking it. And so therefore they had a smaller pool of people who were coming forward to be in this study. Additionally, here is what the problem was, because they were struggling with the population to recruit, because they had 208 trial sites, and they were looking to try and pull people in. And this is what was said by one executive. This is a very difficult population to recruit, because they were looking at, look at this, healthy adults age 50 to 64. So they needed to find healthy adults age 50 to 64, and they were really struggling to recruit them. Even when patients were willing to participate in the studies, more than 80% fail at pre-screening because they don't meet the health criteria. It's been a real challenge to enroll enough patients, particularly given the scale of these trials. And they were aiming for about 25 to 30,000 volunteers. And this is what they were aiming for. Well, Moderna was looking for 30,000 volunteers. They're struggling with the same thing. I think Pfizer was looking at 25 to 30,000, and 80% of them were failing at pre-screening. So here's the point that I want to make. What we have is that they had a cohort of people, and this was still about 18 to 20% of the population still wanted their boosters. But of that 18 to 20%, who most likely are already vaccinated, already having boosters, and wanted further boosters and were happy to be a part of the study, 80% of them were not fit enough. They were not well enough. Now, you may say that's purely coincidental, but based on the trajectory that I was saying in this cohort, this is looking at the UK numbers, but I suspect it will be the same in the United States if they choose to look. There was a 182% increase in terms of heart disease, and you would have seen a similar thing with diabetes in a cohort who is primarily vaccinated, possibly, and therefore 80% of them couldn't fit the criteria for the study. If that doesn't raise a flag that people go, hold on, shouldn't this be a healthier cohort? You know, they have been vaccinated, they have been protected from COVID, they should be doing well. The sick ones should be those unvaccinated people lying around who should be so sick. No, there is a problem here. And I suspect that there is going to be a brushing aside of this issue. 80% of that willing cohort were not healthy enough to be enrolled in a trial. My assumption, and they didn't say this, but my assumption is that almost 100% of that cohort would already have been vaccinated. I just cannot imagine an unvaccinated person deciding to sign up for that. In any case, they couldn't, because this was a booster shot. they would have had to have had their primary vaccination series and then go on to having a booster shot. So I would suspect nobody in that cohort was unvaccinated. Is that relevant? Possibly, because all of the predictions that I have been saying so far are about what happens when virus is still circulating in a highly vaccinated region, the COVID storm, spike triggered autoimmune response mechanism. I predict that that is going to be our most serious issue. And when you look at the data, we are seeing unusual patterns of increase in diseases across all age groups, whether or not they're older or younger. This is in the 60 to 74, 237% increase with myocarditis. This is free, not the whole thing, but if you want to take a look at it, look at the link in the description. Join me in the research journey. We need to start asking harder questions. Don't just let these headlines get away from you. Put this in front of people who should be interested in this kind of information. They can't find enough healthy people to do a COVID vaccine study. This is a problem. Have we made the whole population sicker? Will there be any acknowledgement for it? Or will it be brushed under the carpet, as has been the case so far? Keep up to date with what's happening, and I'll continue to share valuable information. Have a great evening.